A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. The Seer's Curse. The boy would die in 3 days. Ilara Voss knew this the moment the blacksmith's wife appeared at her door, the child limp in her arms. Above the boy's fevered head floated ancient runas, silver against the morning mist. The symbols twisted and reformed, counting down with merciless precision. 3 days, 72 hours, 4,320 minutes until this woman would bury her only son. "Please," the woman begged, tears streaming down weathered cheeks. "You're the only one who might help him." Ilara's hands remained cold as she beckoned them inside her small cabin. The dwelling sat at the forest's edge, far enough from the village that people could pretend she didn't exist until desperation drove them to her door. 11 years she had lived here, isolated by a gift no one understood and everyone feared. She examined the child with gentle efficiency. His skin burned beneath her fingertips, his breathing shallow and labored. The runas above his head pulsed steadily, unchanging. Death had already marked him. Her power only revealed what fate had already decreed. "I have herbs that might ease his suffering," Ilara said quietly, moving to her shelves. Her cabin smelled of dried lavender and sage, bundles hanging from the rafters alongside strings of garlic and medicinal roots. Willow bark for the fever, chamomile to help him rest. "But can you save him?" The woman's voice cracked with desperate hope. Ilara's throat tightened. She could not lie, but neither could she speak the truth. If she revealed what she saw, they would blame her for the death rather than merely fearing her gift. It had happened before. "I will do everything I can," she replied, which was true enough. She would try, even knowing her efforts were futile. The numbers never lied. 3 days later, when the blacksmith carried his son's small body through the village square, the whispers began anew. Witch, Deathbringer, cursed. Ilara heard them from her cabin window, watched the torches flicker in angry hands as dusk fell. They did not come for her. Not quite. But the message was clear. Her presence was tolerated barely, and only because sometimes she could help. But she would never belong. That night Tavish arrived. Ilara heard his horse before she saw him, the steady clip of hooves on the forest path. Her brother was 18 now, no longer the boy she had protected when their parents died. He sat tall in the saddle, his beta wolf giving him confidence and strength she would never possess. Above his head, the runas glowed with their familiar message, 87 years. She had checked it obsessively since he turned 13 and received his wolf. The number never changed, and each time she verified it, relief flooded through her. "You need to leave tonight," Tavish said without preamble, dismounting swiftly. His face was grave in the moonlight, his hazel eyes reflecting worry. "The Alpha King has issued a summons. Every person with unusual gifts must present themselves at Thornhaven Castle within 5 days. Ilara's breath caught. "And if they refuse?" "Death." The word fell heavy between them. The decree was absolute. "He's gathering people from across the kingdom. Seers, healers, those who can track better than any wolf. Anyone whose abilities exceed natural explanation." She wrapped her arms around herself. The autumn night suddenly colder. "They will kill me there just as surely as if I refuse to go. You know what I am, what people think of me. Then don't tell them everything." Tavish stepped closer, urgency coloring his tone. "Show enough to satisfy the summons, but not so much that they fear you. The Alpha King is said to be harsh but fair. If you prove useful rather than threatening, you might survive this." Above his head, those precious runas still promised 87 years. He would live. He would be safe. That knowledge steadied her when nothing else could. "I'll go," she said finally. "But Tavish, if something happens to me—" "Nothing will happen," he interrupted fiercely. "I'll escort you to the border of the capital territory myself. You're my sister, Ilara. I won't let them hurt you." The promise warmed her, even knowing he could not truly protect her from what awaited. He was Beta, strong and capable. But she was Omega, wolfless, the lowest rank in any pack's hierarchy. And worse than that, she carried a gift that made death itself visible. As Tavish helped her pack her meager belongings, Ilara's mind drifted to another night, another summons. She had been 12 when the power first manifested, sitting at the dinner table when Runa suddenly appeared above her mother's head. 1 week. The symbols had been clear and terrible, counting down with each passing second. "Mother," she had whispered, pointing with a trembling finger. "There are numbers above you." Strange symbols. They say 1 week. Her mother had laughed, thinking it a child's imagination. Her father had been less amused, warning her not to speak nonsense. But Ilara had known. She had known with absolute certainty that in 7 days, her mother would die. She had been right. A hunting accident, they called it. A terrible tragedy. Her mother's horse had startled, throwing her against a tree. The neck had broken instantly, exactly 7 days after Ilara first saw the runas. The pack had not been kind in the aftermath. Whispers of dark magic, of curses brought upon the family by Ilara's presence. When her father could not meet her eyes without grief and perhaps fear shadowing his face, she had known she could not stay. At 13, she had left. Found this cabin, built a life from nothing. Ready? Tavish's voice pulled her back to the present. Ilara looked around her small home one final time. She might never see it again. The thought should have frightened her more than it did. Instead, she felt only a strange numbness, as if she were already a ghost haunting her own life. The journey to Thornhaven took 4 days. Tavish stayed with her for 2, then had to return to his duties at the border pack. Before he left, he pressed a small pouch of coins into her hands. "For supplies," he said. "And Ilara, be careful. Trust your instincts." She watched him ride away, the runas above his head still promising 87 years of life. The knowledge was her only comfort, as she continued alone. On the 3rd day, she joined a merchant caravan heading toward the capital. The traders were wary of a lone woman traveler, but Coin bought passage. She kept to herself, sitting at the edge of their evening campfire, watching the runas above each person's head. The merchants had decades ahead of them. The guards scattered between months and years, all except one. A young trader, barely 20, had runas that made her stomach turn. Tomorrow. The symbols glowed with cruel certainty above his laughing face as he joked with his companions. Ilara approached him carefully as the others began to sleep. "You should be cautious tomorrow," she said quietly. "Stay alert. Watch the roads." He looked at her with dismissive amusement. "Why? You having visions, witch woman?" The word stung, but she kept her voice steady. "Just a feeling. Please, be careful." He laughed her off, returning to his bedroll. She did not sleep that night. At dawn, bandits struck. They came from the forest like shadows, blades flashing in the early light. The young trader died in the first moments, an arrow through his throat before he could even draw his weapon. The guards fought off the attackers, but by the time the dust settled, 3 were dead. The survivors looked at Ilara with new eyes that held fear and suspicion in equal measure. She had warned him. How had she known? She did not wait for their questions, gathering her pack and walking away before they could decide whether she was prophet or curse. Thornhaven rose from the valley like a crown of black stone. The castle dominated the landscape, its towers reaching toward gray clouds. Banners bearing a silver wolf snapped in the wind. Ilara had never seen anything so imposing, so utterly foreign to her quiet existence in the forest. Guards at the outer gates examined her summons, their faces impassive as they waved her through. She was directed to join a growing group in a courtyard where 11 others waited. Each bore the same nervous tension, the same awareness that their lives might end today. Ilara studied them covertly. A woman with healing hands. A man whose tracking abilities reportedly exceeded any wolf's. Others with gifts she could not immediately identify. Above their heads, the runas told their stories. Decades for most, years for a few. All were adults. All bore supernatural abilities that set them apart. The massive oak doors swung open with a groan that echoed across stone. A herald's voice rang out, formal and cold. "All rise for His Majesty, Dominic Greythorn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories." He entered like a storm given human form. Ilara's breath stopped in her chest. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with predatory grace that marked him as alpha even without the crown. His black hair was cut short, his beard neatly trimmed, emphasizing a strong jaw and sharp features. A scar cut through his right eyebrow, giving his amber gold eyes a fierce quality. He wore simple black clothing rather than ceremonial robes, but power radiated from him in waves that made every wolf in the room instinctively lower their eyes. Every wolf except Alara, who could not look away, because above his head, where runas should have appeared, there was nothing. No numbers, no symbols, only empty air where fate should have declared his end. For the first time in 11 years, Alara could not see when someone would die. Panic clawed at her throat. She blinked, willing the runas to appear. They must be there. They were always there. Everyone had an ending. But no matter how hard she stared, the space above the Alpha King's head remained blank. Empty. Void. Dominic's gaze swept across the assembled group, assessing each person with clinical precision. When his eyes reached Alara, they paused. Something flickered across his face, gone too quickly to name. Then he looked away, and she could breathe again. "You have been summoned because you possess gifts beyond normal capability," Dominic said, his voice carrying authority that demanded attention. "I will test each of you. Those whose abilities prove genuine will be offered positions serving the crown. Those who have lied or exaggerated will face consequences." He gestured to an elderly man standing beside the raised platform. The man's expensive robes marked him as someone important, though Alara did not recognize him. Above his head, runas glowed steadily. 18 months. "We will begin," Dominic announced. One by one, he called them forward. The healer demonstrated her gift on a guard with an old wound. The tracker identified hidden objects throughout the hall. Each person's ability was scrutinized, tested, judged. Some were dismissed immediately. Others were told to remain. Finally, Dominic's attention settled on Alara. "You. Step forward." Her legs felt unsteady as she approached the platform. Up close, the Alpha King was even more intimidating. He towered over her, his amber eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her want to flee. "Name," he commanded. "Ilara Voss, Your Majesty." "Your gift." She swallowed hard. How much truth should she reveal? "I can see things about people, things that will happen to them." "Demonstrate." Her mind raced. She needed to prove her ability without revealing its full scope. Her gaze landed on the elderly man in expensive robes, the one with 18 months above his head. "That man," she said, pointing. "He will not live to see another full year pass." The man, Aldous Merrick, according to the hushed whispers around her, stiffened. Dominic's eyes narrowed. "That is a guess, not proof. Anyone could claim someone elderly has limited time." "Then choose someone," Alara replied, forcing steadiness into her voice. "Anyone. I will tell you what I see." A guard stepped forward voluntarily. Young, strong, confident. Above his head, runas glowed with terrifying clarity. 6 hours. Alara's voice emerged hollow. 6 hours from now, he will die. Silence fell across the hall. The guard's confidence faltered. Dominic studied her face for a long moment. "Take this man to the infirmary," he ordered. "Watch him closely. If he lives beyond 6 hours, this woman will face charges of deception. If he dies," he paused, "we will speak again." Guards escorted Alara to a chamber in what appeared to be the guest wing. It was far nicer than her cabin, with a proper bed and window overlooking gardens. But it was still a prison. She could not leave until her prediction proved true or false. She sat by the window, watching the sun move across the sky, counting minutes, counting heartbeats. 6 hours later, screams echoed through the castle corridors. The guard was dead. Slow poison, they would later discover. Something in his system for weeks, finally reaching its lethal concentration. Alara closed her eyes, grief and vindication warring in her chest. She had been right. She was always right. The numbers never lied. Chapter 2. Borrowed Time. Dominic Graythorne stood in the doorway of Alara's chamber as dawn broke over Thornhaven. His amber eyes studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She had not slept, sitting vigil by the window as the hours counted down to the guard's death. Now, in the pale morning light, the Alpha King looked less like the imposing figure from the throne room, and more like a man seeking answers to questions he did not want to ask. "How did you know?" His voice was quiet, controlled, dangerous in its calm. Alara stood slowly, her legs stiff from hours of sitting. She met his gaze despite every instinct screaming at her to lower her eyes in submission. "I told you. I see things. That is not an answer." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The space suddenly felt much smaller. A man is dead. Poisoned, the healers say. Slow acting in his system for weeks. You could not have known that through any natural means. There is nothing natural about what I am. The words came out sharper than she intended. 11 years of being called witch, curse, deathbringer, had left scars deeper than any blade could make. Dominic moved to the window, standing where she had kept her vigil. "Explain it to me. Everything. How your gift works, what you see, how long you have carried this burden." Burden, not curse. The word choice caught her off guard. She swallowed hard, choosing her words carefully. "When I look at people, I see symbols above their heads. Ancient runas, written in a language I never learned but somehow understand. They show me when someone will die. Not how, not why. Just when. How long have you had this ability?" "Since I was 12. The memory rose unbidden. Her mother's face, laughing at the dinner table. The runas appearing like cruel prophecy above her head. My mother was the first. I saw 1 week above her. 7 days later, she died in a hunting accident." Something flickered across Dominic's face. Understanding, perhaps. Or pity. She could not tell which she hated more. "Your pack cast you out," he said. "It was not a question. They feared me. Said I brought death wherever I walked." Alara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the summer warmth. "They were not entirely wrong. I cannot change what I see. I can only watch people die, knowing exactly when it will happen but powerless to prevent it." Dominic turned from the window, his gaze sharp. "The guard. You said 6 hours. He died in exactly 6 hours." "Yes. And the elderly man in the hall, Aldous. You said he would not see another year. 18 months, Alara corrected. "That is what the runas showed. What do you see when you look at me?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications she did not fully understand. Alara forced herself to meet his eyes, to speak the truth that had been haunting her since the moment he entered the hall. "Nothing. When I look at you, there are no runas. No numbers, no symbols, just empty space where fate should declare your ending." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "You are the first person in 11 years I cannot read." Silence stretched between them. Dominic's jaw tightened, muscles working beneath his neatly trimmed beard. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an edge of something that might have been relief, or might have been dread. "You will stay here. 2 weeks. I will provide access to the Royal Library. Between your gift and the texts we have, we will determine why you cannot see me." "I am not a prisoner?" Alara asked carefully. "You are a guest." He paused at the door. "But if you attempt to leave before the 2 weeks are complete, you will become a prisoner. Am I clear?" "Perfectly, Your Majesty." After he left, Alara sank onto the bed, her hands trembling. She had survived the first test. But something about Dominic's reaction troubled her. He had not seemed surprised by her inability to see his death, almost as if he had expected it. The Royal Library was vast, stretching across 3 floors of an ancient tower. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling, some so old their leather bindings cracked at the slightest touch. Alara moved through the stacks with careful reverence, pulling volumes on prophecy, divination, and supernatural gifts. 3 days passed in quiet research. She saw Dominic only in passing, their interactions limited to brief nods in corridors. But she felt his presence throughout the castle, the way all wolves must feel their alpha. It was both comforting and deeply unsettling. On the 4th night, the nightmare came. She was 12 again, watching her mother fall from the horse. But this time, the fall repeated endlessly. Her mother hit the ground, bones breaking with sickening cracks, then stood and fell again. Over and over, and above her head, the runas counted down. 7 days, 6 days, 5 days, until there were no days left, and her mother's eyes, vacant and accusing, stared directly at Alara. "You saw," her mother's corpse whispered. "You knew. Why did you not save me?" Alara woke with a scream caught in her throat, tears streaming down her face. Her hands clutched the blankets, knuckles white. The room was dark except for moonlight streaming through the window. She tried to steady her breathing, to remind herself it was only a dream. But the guilt remained, fresh and sharp as the day her mother died. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Who is it?" Her voice came out rough, broken. "Dominic." A pause. "I heard you cry out. Are you injured?" She should have sent him away. Should have claimed she was fine, maintained some dignity. Instead, she found herself crossing to the door, opening it to reveal the Alpha King, standing in the corridor wearing only sleep pants, his chest bare. Scars marked his torso, some from battle, but others were different. Ritual marks, precise and deliberate, carved into his skin in patterns she recognized from her research on ancient magic. "I am well," she lied, but her voice betrayed her. Dominic's gaze moved past her to the rumpled bed, the tear-stained pillow. "You are a terrible liar. It was only a dream. About your mother. Again. Not a question." He seemed to know things without being told, reading people the way she read their deaths. Alara nodded, not trusting her voice. "The first death is always the hardest," Dominic said quietly. "The one that teaches you that power and responsibility are inseparable. That knowing does not mean you can change what comes." She looked up at him, startled by the understanding in his tone. "You sound as though you speak from experience." "I do." He did not elaborate, but something in his eyes spoke of old pain, buried deep. "Try to rest. The library will still be there in the morning." He turned to leave, but Alara found herself speaking before she could stop herself. "The marks on your chest. They are ritual scars. I have seen similar symbols in texts about binding magic." Dominic went very still. When he looked back at her, his expression was unreadable. "You are observant. What were you binding?" "That," he said softly, "is a conversation for another night. Sleep, Alara. Your gift is burden enough without adding exhaustion to it." The next morning, Alara found a text that made her breath catch. It was ancient, the pages yellow with age, written in a dialect that took her hours to translate. But the chapter on Vidente de Destino changed everything. Seers of fate, the text called them. A bloodline stretching back before wolf packs organized themselves into hierarchies, before alphas ruled territories. These seers could perceive the threads of destiny connecting all living things, seeing not just death, but the moments that defined lives. They were druids, the text claimed, tied to magic older than shifter blood. But the text also spoke of limitations. Seers could not perceive those who existed outside normal time. Those who had been touched by magic that altered their fundamental connection to fate itself. Alara read the passage 3 times, her heart pounding. Dominic was outside time. The ritual scars on his chest were not decorative. They were evidence of magic performed, bargains made, prices paid. She needed to tell him, needed to understand what he had done to himself. That evening, a formal dinner was held in the Great Hall. Alara had been invited, though she suspected it was less invitation and more command. She wore the only decent dress she owned, simple gray wool that marked her as exactly what she was, a common omega, with no status or wealth. The hall was filled with nobility, regional alphas and their families, dressed in silks and furs, jewels glittering in candlelight. Alara felt every eye track her entrance, heard the whispers follow in her wake. She took a seat at the far end of the long table, hoping to remain invisible. Lady Vivian Ashcroft had other plans. The woman was beautiful in a cold, calculated way. Her blonde hair was arranged in elaborate braids, her dress cut to emphasize curves and status. She sat near Dominic, close enough to touch, and her amber eyes fixed on Alara with obvious disdain. "Tell me," Vivian said, her voice carrying across the table. "Is it true that a simple Omega has been granted access to the royal library? How extraordinary!" Several nobles turned to look at Alara, their expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. She kept her spine straight, her voice level. "His Majesty was generous enough to allow my research." "Research?" Vivian laughed, the sound sharp. "What could an Omega possibly research? Unless," her eyes narrowed, "you are looking for ways to bewitch our king further. I have heard the rumors that you claim supernatural gifts, that you manipulate him with talk of death and destiny." "Enough." Dominic's voice cut through the hall like a blade. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to the Alpha King. He had not raised his voice, but the command in that single word was absolute. "Lady Vivian, you will mind your tongue, or you will find yourself escorted from my hall." Vivian's face flushed, humiliation and anger warring in her expression. "Your Majesty, I know exactly what you meant." Dominic's gaze was ice. "And I know exactly what you will not do again. Miss Voss is my guest. Insult her and you insult me. Are we clear?" "Crystal, Your Majesty." Vivian's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. The dinner continued in awkward silence. Alara barely tasted her food, too aware of the hostile stares, the whispered conversations. When the meal finally ended, she escaped to the castle gardens, needing fresh air and solitude. She found neither. Dominic was already there, standing on a stone terrace overlooking the valley below. The moon cast silver light across his features, softening the harsh angles. He did not turn when she approached, but his voice indicated he knew she was there. "I apologize for Vivian's behavior. You did not cause it." Alara moved to the railing, keeping careful distance between them. "Though I am curious why she seems to hate me so intensely when we have never met. She wanted to be queen." Dominic's tone was matter of fact. "Her family lost territory and status in a political scandal years ago. Marrying me would have restored their position. I refused her suit 3 times. She does not handle rejection well, so I am simply a convenient target for her anger." "You are." He finally looked at her. "Does it bother you, being hated for things beyond your control?" Alara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I have been hated for 11 years, Your Majesty. One more person makes little difference." "Dominic," he said quietly. "When we are alone, you may call me Dominic." The informality surprised her. Alphas did not usually grant such privileges to Omegas, especially ones they barely knew. "Why?" "Because I understand what it means to carry a burden alone. To be feared for what you are rather than who you are." He turned fully toward her, and in the moonlight, she could see vulnerability in his eyes. "Your gift, do you consider it a curse or a blessing?" "A prison," Alara answered honestly. "I know the end of everyone I meet, but I cannot change it, cannot save them. I can only watch them march toward their fates, counting down the days, hours, minutes until death claims them. And yet you still warn them when you can. The merchant on the road, the guard in my hall. You try to save them even knowing it is futile. Trying and failing is better than not trying at all." She met his eyes. "What burden do you carry, Dominic? What magic have you performed that placed you outside time?" His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he would not answer. Then he spoke, his voice low and rough with old pain. "That is a story for another night. But know this, Alara. Your gift may feel like a curse, but I suspect it is far more important than you realize. And perhaps together, we will discover why fate has brought you to my door." He left her there beneath the stars, his words echoing in her mind. In the shadows of the garden, neither of them noticed Aldous Merrick watching from a window above, his expression calculating as his fingers traced symbols of dark. What she had read before were counterfeit runas, borrowed numbers stitched from stolen lives. The glamour could fool a glance, not a reckoning. Staring straight into the tear his soul had made, Alara saw the truth. Not 18 months, but a mouth of darkness chewing through time itself. Magic in the air. Deep in the castle, Alara's brother Tavish received new orders. a transfer to the capital, a position in the royal guard. When he arrived 3 days later, Ilara felt relief flood through her at the sight of his familiar face. Above his head, the runas still promised 87 years. At least one person she loved would be safe. Chapter 3. Blood and Revelation. The urgent knock came 3 days after Tavish's arrival. Ilara was in the library, surrounded by texts on ancient magic, when a guard burst through the doors. His face was pale, tension radiating from every line of his body. The Alpha King requires your presence immediately. Northern border under attack. Ilara's stomach dropped. She followed him through corridors that suddenly felt too long, too narrow. In the war room, Dominic stood over a massive map. His commanders gathered around him. Above each soldier's head, runas glowed with their allotted time. Decades for most, years for some. But warfare had a way of changing those numbers, and Ilara's gift could not account for choices not yet made. Shadow creatures, Dominic was saying, his voice clipped and commanding. They emerged from the northern forest 3 nights ago. The village of Millbrook has fallen. We ride at dawn. Ilara stepped forward before she could stop herself. Take me with you. Every head in the room turned toward her. The commanders looked shocked. Dominic's amber eyes narrowed dangerously. Absolutely not. My gift could save lives, she pressed, keeping her voice steady despite the weight of all those stares. I can see which soldiers are in greatest danger. Guide you to minimize casualties. You cannot fight. You have no wolf. Dominic's tone was final, dismissive. But she heard something else beneath it. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. I do not need to fight to be useful. Ilara moved closer to the map, studying the terrain. You need information. I can provide it. Unless you would prefer to march blind into battle, losing men you could have saved. The words hung in the air between them. One of the commanders, a grizzled beta with silver threading through his dark hair, cleared his throat. The Omega makes a valid point, Your Majesty. Intelligence wins battles as surely as strength. Dominic's jaw worked beneath his beard. His hands were flat on the table, muscles tense. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Fine. But you stay behind the front lines. You follow every order without question. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood. Understood. The expedition departed at dawn. 50 soldiers, all seasoned warriors, their wolves eager for battle. Ilara rode beside the supply wagons, watching the runas above each head. Most showed years or decades. But 3 soldiers bore numbers that made her throat tight. Tomorrow, 3 days, 1 week. They would not survive what was coming. Tavish found her as they made camp the first night. He looked older in his armor, more soldier than brother. Above his head, 87 years still glowed with reassuring steadiness. You should not have come, he said quietly, crouching beside her fire. I had to. Ilara could not explain the compulsion that drove her. The need to be near Dominic, to protect him, even though he needed no protection from her. Tavish, stay close to me during the fighting. Please. He studied her face in the firelight. You saw something. I always see something. She forced a smile that felt hollow. Just promise me you will be careful. I promise. He squeezed her shoulder before returning to his post with the other guards. Ilara did not sleep that night. She sat vigil, watching the numbers above sleeping soldiers, praying they would not change. Knowing prayer did nothing against fate's cold calculations. Dominic found her still awake as the camp began to stir before dawn. He moved with predatory silence, settling beside her without invitation. This close, she could smell pine and smoke clinging to his skin, could see the exhaustion shadowing his eyes. You should rest, he said. So should you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I have not slept properly in 3 years. 1 more night makes little difference. Before she could question that statement, he stood and offered his hand. Walk with me. They moved beyond the camp's edge, far enough for privacy, but close enough to hear if alarm was raised. The forest around them was ancient, trees thick with moss, morning mist clinging to the ground. It should have been peaceful. Instead, Ilara felt only dread coiling tighter with each step. The soldiers you have been watching. Dominic said without preamble. "The ones whose time is short. Tell me which they are." She should have known he would notice. "I cannot. If you change your strategy to protect them specifically, you might endanger others. The future is not fixed until the moment arrives. Any action I take to prevent one death might cause 3 more. You carry terrible knowledge." His voice was soft, almost gentle. "No wonder you chose isolation. It chose me." Ilara wrapped her arms around herself against the morning chill. "I never wanted this gift. Never asked to watch people die, counting down their final moments while they laugh and love and live, unaware that fate has already marked them." Dominic stopped walking. When she turned to look at him, something raw and honest shone in his eyes. "I know what it means to carry the weight of death, to make choices that haunt you, knowing lives hang in the balance of your decisions. The difference is, you are helpless to change what you see. I am cursed with the opposite problem. Too much power, too many choices, all leading to the same inevitable end." "What end?" "That," he said quietly, "is a story for after the battle. Survive what is coming, Ilara. Then I will tell you everything." The attack came at midday. Shadow creatures poured from the forest like smoke given form. They were twisted things, wolves corrupted by dark magic, their eyes burning with unnatural fire. The soldiers shifted with practiced efficiency, wolves meeting wolves in a clash of fangs and fury. Ilara stayed behind the lines as ordered, but her eyes tracked every movement. The soldier marked for tomorrow fought near the eastern flank. She saw the creature lunging for his exposed throat, saw the exact moment his fate would seal. "Eastern flank," she screamed. "Pull back." Dominic's wolf, massive and silver-gray, redirected mid-battle. He crashed into the attacking creature, driving it away from the doomed soldier. The man stumbled backward, alive. For now. The battle raged. Ilara shouted warnings until her voice went hoarse, guiding Dominic through the chaos with desperate urgency. They saved most, but not all. The soldier marked for 1 week fell beneath 3 creatures, his death scream cutting through the din. Then she saw it. A soldier fighting near the command post, runas above his head shifting from 3 days to now. The change happened in an instant, fate adjusting to new circumstances. He would die. Right now. Unless Ilara ran without thinking. She crashed into the soldier just as a shadow creature lunged, claws extended. They hit the ground hard. She felt the creature's fetid breath, saw its jaws descending toward her throat. Then, a silver-gray wolf slammed into the monster with bone-crushing force. Dominic's wolf was enormous, radiating dominance and rage. He tore into the creature with savage precision, each strike calculated to kill. Blood sprayed across Ilara's face as the shadow beast fell. More creatures converged on them. Dominic stood over her, snarling challenge at anything that approached. His wolf's eyes met hers for one impossible moment, amber gold burning with something that transcended animal instinct. Recognition. Fear. Possession. Mine, those eyes said. Mine to protect. Guards rallied to their king. The creatures were driven back, forced to retreat into the forest's depths. As the last shadows fled, Dominic's wolf turned and left without looking back. Ilara remained on the ground, her hands shaking, her heart racing so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. Tavish pulled her to her feet. "Are you hurt?" "No." The word came out breathless. "I am fine." But she was not fine. She could still feel the weight of Dominic's wolf standing over her, could still see that look in his inhuman eyes. Something had shifted between them in that moment of violence and protection, something that terrified her. The camp that night was subdued. They had won, but victory tasted of ash and blood. 7 soldiers dead, 12 wounded. It could have been worse. Ilara knew it could have been so much worse, but the weight of those 7 deaths pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. She sat alone by the medical tent, watching healers work on the injured. None of them bore runas indicating imminent death, but trauma had a way of changing the numbers. She could do nothing but wait and watch. "You saved that soldier's life." Dominic's voice came from behind her. He had shifted back to human form, dressed in simple clothes, blood still staining his skin. He moved stiffly, favoring his left side, wounded, though he would never admit it. I could not save the others. No, he sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. But you saved many who would have died without your warnings. That counts for something. Alara turned to look at him properly. In the firelight, exhaustion carved deep lines around his eyes. But something else was there too, something softer than she had seen before. You protected me, she said quietly. You could have died. I would do it again. The words were simple, absolute. The moment I saw you in danger, nothing else mattered. Not strategy, not the battle, just you. Her breath caught. Why? Dominic was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion barely contained. Since you arrived at my castle, something has been changing inside me. I have felt nothing but cold emptiness for 3 years, existing without truly living, going through motions without purpose. Then you appeared, and suddenly I am feeling things I thought I had lost forever. Anger, fear, hope. He paused. Desire. Alara's pulse thundered in her ears. Dominic, I know you are Omega. I know you have no wolf. I know 100 reasons why this is impossible. His hand found hers in the darkness between them, fingers intertwining. But when that creature lunged for you, I understood something with absolute clarity. I would burn this kingdom to ash before I let anyone harm you. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Alara knew she should pull away, should remind him of the gulf that separated their ranks. But his hand was warm in hers, and his eyes held something that looked devastatingly like hope. Tell me, she whispered. Tell me why I cannot see your death. Tell me what you sacrificed. Dominic's grip tightened. Then slowly, he began to speak. 3 years ago, a portal opened on the northern border. Not shadow creatures, but something worse. Demons from a realm beyond our world, hungry to devour everything. My father tried to seal it using his life, but the magic required more than life. It required future. All possible futures, every path not yet taken, every choice not yet made. My father had lived most of his life. His future was limited, so I offered mine instead. Alara's throat closed around words that would not come. I stood before that portal and gave up every tomorrow I might have had, every path, every possibility, every fate the universe held for me. The portal sealed. The demons were banished. But I was left existing outside of time's normal flow. I have no destined death because I have no destined anything. I am unmoored from fate itself. The ritual scars, Alara breathed. Yes, the price of salvation. His voice dropped lower. And every day since, I have felt myself drifting further from humanity. Emotions fading, connections weakening. I feared that one day I would wake as something else entirely, something cold and hollow, wearing my face but containing nothing of who I once was, until I came, until you came. He turned fully toward her, his free hand rising to cup her cheek. You make me feel, Alara. For the first time in 3 years, I want something beyond mere duty. I want to live, not just exist, and that terrifies me more than any demon ever could. She should have pulled away, should have reminded herself that Alpha Kings did not want wolfless Omegas, that this moment was temporary insanity born of battle and blood. Instead, she leaned into his touch and kissed him. Dominic froze for a heartbeat. Then his hand slid into her hair, pulling her closer. The kiss was not gentle. It was desperate, hungry, the culmination of weeks of tension and denied attraction. His mouth moved against hers with an urgency that stole her breath, his tongue tracing her lower lip before deepening the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he said. I know. I cannot offer you a normal life. Cannot promise you safety or certainty. My existence is borrowed time, and anyone who stands beside me inherits that danger. Alara smiled despite herself. I have been dangerous since I was 12 years old. At least now I will have company. He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. Then his expression sobered. "We will find a way. Together. Your gift brought you to me for a reason. I have to believe that." As they sat together in the firelight, Ilara looked at the space above his head where Runus should have been. Empty. Void. But for the first time, that emptiness did not feel like absence. It felt like possibility. They would find a way to anchor him back to time, to give him a future worth living. She had to believe that too, because the alternative, losing him to the same fate that claimed everyone she had ever tried to save, was unthinkable. Chapter 4. Shadows and Accusations. The journey back to Thornhaven took 3 days. Ilara rode beside Dominic now. Their relationship shifted into something neither could name, but both felt with startling intensity. They did not speak of the kiss, but it lingered between them in every glance, every accidental touch. The soldiers noticed. Tavish noticed. And in the shadows of the camp each night, Aldous Merrick noticed most of all. The counselor had accompanied the expedition, advising on matters of territory and law. Ilara had paid him little attention before, focused as she was on the battle and Dominic's revelation. But now, watching him move through camp with oil-smooth grace, she felt unease crawl beneath her skin. There was something wrong about Aldous, something that had nothing to do with the 18 months. For a heartbeat, the symbols above the counselor looked too perfect, lacquered, almost painted on glass, before settling into neat, reassuring lines. Ilara dismissed the prickle along her spine as nerves. Later she would know better. Some fates gleam because they've been polished to hide the rot beneath, glowing above his head. On the second night, as guards changed shifts and most slept, Ilara rose from her bedroll. Sleep evaded her, her mind churning with questions about Dominic's sacrifice and what it meant for both their futures. She walked to the edge of camp, seeking solitude beneath the stars. A council meeting was being held near the command tent. She had not intended to eavesdrop, but voices carried in the still night air, Dominic's deep rumble, the beta commander's measured tones, and Aldous, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. "The Omega has proven useful," Aldous was saying, "though one wonders at the wisdom of keeping such power close to the throne. Seers have been known to manipulate those they advise. Miss Voss has done nothing but help." Dominic's response was cold. "She saved lives today. Of course, Your Majesty. I meant no disrespect." A pause. "I merely suggest caution. Power attracts power, and not all gifts come without strings attached." Ilara's hands clenched. She should walk away, should not listen to whispered poison, but something kept her rooted in place. The meeting ended shortly after. As the commanders dispersed, Ilara caught a glimpse of Aldous through the tent flap. He stood alone for a moment, and in that instant, she looked at him properly. Really looked, the way she had learned to look at people over 11 years of reading death. Above his head, where Runus should have glowed with their promise of 18 months, there was emptiness, but not the neutral void she saw above Dominic. This was different, darker. A black hole that seemed to swallow light rather than simply lacking it. Corruption made visible, though only to her cursed eyes. Her breath caught. She knew that darkness, had read about it in texts describing those who sold their souls to forbidden magic. Bruxos das Trevas, the ancient scholars called them, warlocks who traded their natural connection to fate for power that came from realms better left untouched. Aldous was not what he seemed, and he had been in Dominic's inner circle for how long? Ilara turned and nearly ran back to her tent, her mind racing. She had to tell Dominic, had to warn him that his most trusted advisor was something monstrous wearing human skin. But how to do so without sounding mad? Without revealing the full extent of what she could see? She would find a way. She had to. But Aldous had not survived decades of deception by being careless. He had noticed her noticing him, and he had plans already in motion. They reached Thornhaven on the 3rd day. The castle rose from the valley like a dark promise, its towers piercing gray clouds. Ilara felt relief at seeing those familiar walls, even though she had only been there a short time. It felt more like home than her forest cabin ever had. Tavish found her as they dismounted in the courtyard. His armor bore new dents, evidence of the battle. But above his head those precious runas still promised 87 years. She wanted to hug him, to hold on to the one piece of family she had left. Instead, she simply gripped his arm briefly. "You fought well," she said quietly. "You saved us." His eyes were serious. "Half the regiment would be dead without your warnings. They know it. They are grateful, even if they do not say so. Gratitude fades quickly when fear takes root." Ilara knew this truth too well. "Be careful, Tavish. Something is wrong here. I can feel it." Before he could question her, a guard approached. "Miss Voss? His Majesty requests your presence in the council chamber." She followed the guard through familiar corridors, her unease growing with each step. The council chamber was empty except for Dominic, who stood before a massive window overlooking the training grounds. He did not turn when she entered. "I need your counsel," he said quietly. "During our absence, there have been reports, whispers among the nobility that you have bewitched me, that your gift is not sight, but manipulation." Ilara's stomach dropped. "I have done nothing." "I know." He finally turned, and the exhaustion in his face made her chest ache. "But perception matters in politics. Aldous advised me to send you away, for your own protection as much as mine. I refused. Aldous." She spoke the name carefully. "Dominic, I need to tell you something about him." The doors burst open. Aldous swept in with 4 guards, his face grave. Behind them came Lady Vivian and 2 other regional alphas. Their expressions ranged from concern to barely concealed satisfaction. "Your Majesty," Aldous began, his voice heavy with false regret. "I am sorry to interrupt, but a matter of utmost urgency has arisen. Evidence has been discovered in Miss Voss's chambers. Evidence of forbidden magic." Ilara's blood turned to ice. "That is impossible. I have no magic beyond sight. These objects were found. If I name your corruption without proof, you'll call it hysteria. If I stay silent, you'll call it guilt. You prepared both verdicts before I entered this hall. Among your belongings." Aldous gestured, and a guard produced a bundle. Dark crystals. Herbs known for their use in curses. A book bound in leather that radiated wrongness even from across the room. They were hidden beneath your bed. The servants found them while cleaning. "I have never seen those things before in my life." Ilara looked to Dominic desperately. "This is a lie. Someone placed them there." Vivian stepped forward, her face a mask of concern that did not reach her cold eyes. "Your Majesty, I know you care for the girl, but we cannot ignore evidence. If she has been using dark magic to influence you—" "Enough!" Dominic's voice cracked like a whip. But his face was stone, unreadable. When he looked at Ilara, she saw something that terrified her more than Aldous' accusations. Doubt. Not in her, but in himself, in his ability to see clearly past his feelings. "As Alpha King, I must follow the law," Dominic said, each word seeming to cost him. "Miss Voss, you are hereby confined to quarters pending formal investigation. If these accusations prove false, you will be released with our apologies. If they prove true—" He did not finish the sentence. "Dominic, please." Ilara reached for him, but guards stepped between them. "You know me. You know I would never—" "Take her to the North Tower," Dominic ordered, his voice empty of emotion. "Comfortable quarters, but guarded. No visitors without my express permission." The guards gripped her arms. Not roughly, but firmly enough that she could not break free. As they led her away, Ilara looked back once. Dominic stood frozen, his hands clenched at his sides. Above his head, that empty space where fate should declare his end, mocked her. She could save no one. Not even the man she was falling in love with. The tower room was nicer than her forest cabin had been. A proper bed with clean linens, a window showing gardens below, a small table with chair. But the door was locked from outside, and when she tested it, unyielding wood met her efforts. She was a prisoner in all but name. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, marking time she did not feel. Ilara sat by the window, her mind churning. Aldous had planned this perfectly. He had planted evidence during their absence, knowing she would have no way to defend herself. But why? What did he gain from her removal? Unless he wanted Dominic isolated. vulnerable. Without the one person who might see through whatever scheme he was planning, the realization hit her like a physical blow. Aldous was going to kill Dominic, had probably been planning it for months, waiting for the right opportunity. And she had walked directly into his trap. She had to warn someone, had to find a way out of this room. Footsteps approached her door. Ilara turned, hope flaring. Perhaps Dominic had come to his senses. Perhaps Tavish slipped inside, closing the door quickly behind him. His face was tight with worry. I have maybe 5 minutes before the guards notice I am here. What is happening? It is Aldous. The words tumbled out rapidly. He is not what he seems. Above his head, where I should see his death date, there is only darkness, corruption. He sold his soul to dark magic, and now he is moving against Dominic. You have to... I believe you. Tavish gripped her shoulders. But Ilara, without proof, no one else will. They will say you are desperate, lying to save yourself. Then find proof. She grabbed his hands. Search Aldous's chambers. There must be something. Symbols, books, anything that shows he practices forbidden magic. But be careful. He is dangerous. I will. Tavish hesitated. The trial is set for tomorrow. Dominic insisted on quick resolution. He wants this over with. Tomorrow? That was not enough time. Not nearly enough. I will find something, Tavish promised. I swear it. The door opened. A guard's voice, sharp with authority. You there. This prisoner is to have no visitors. I was just leaving, Tavish said evenly. He gave Ilara one last look, trying to convey reassurance he clearly did not feel. Then he was gone, and she was alone again. Night fell. Ilara did not sleep. Could not sleep. She sat by the window, watching stars wheel overhead, trying to think of some way out of this nightmare. At some point, exhaustion pulled her under despite her best efforts. The vision hit like a tidal wave. She was standing in the great hall, but it was wrong. Flames danced along the walls. Bodies littered the floor. And in the center of the devastation, Dominic lay broken, blood pooling beneath him. His amber eyes were open but empty. Dead. Above his head, for the first time since she had known him, runas appeared. Not a date. Just a single word in that ancient language she understood without knowing how. Now, Ilara woke screaming. Her hands clutched the blanket, sweat soaking her skin. The vision had felt different from her normal sight, more visceral, more immediate, as if her gift was evolving, trying to show her not just when people would die, but how to prevent it. The bond. It had to be the bond forming between her and Dominic. Whatever connection they were building was changing both of them in ways neither understood. She had to tell him, had to warn him that Aldous planned to strike during the trial, when protocol demanded Dominic be unarmed and vulnerable. But when dawn came, and guards brought her a simple breakfast, they refused to send word to the king. His Majesty is preparing for the trial. He cannot be disturbed. Please, Ilara begged. Just tell him I need to speak with him. 5 minutes. That is all I ask. No visitors. No messages. The guard's face was not unkind, but his orders were absolute. I am sorry, miss. The day crawled toward noon, the time of the trial. Ilara paced her room, desperation clawing at her throat. She tried the window, but it was too high to jump without breaking bones. She tried the door again, but magic had been worked into the lock. She was trapped, helpless, forced to watch time tick away toward disaster. As the noon bells began to toll, the door finally opened, but it was not rescue. It was the same guards from before. Time for the trial, Miss Voss. His Majesty awaits. They escorted her through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Other nobles passed, their faces showing curiosity, fear, anticipation of spectacle. Above their heads, runas glowed with their allotted times. Decades, years, months. All except one. They passed Aldous in the hallway leading to the great hall. He smiled at her, and in his eyes, she saw victory. He had won. Dominic would die today, and there was nothing she could do to stop it, unless she could break through protocol and reach him. Unless she could make him listen before Aldous struck. The great hall doors loomed ahead, already opening to reveal the assembled court within. Every alpha in the region, every noble who mattered. And at the center, Dominic sat on his throne, unarmed as tradition demanded, waiting to pass judgment on the woman who had captured his heart. Alara took a breath and stepped forward into whatever fate awaited. She had saved no one in 11 years of seeing death approach, but today she would try one more time, even if it cost her everything. Chapter 5. The Trial of Fire. The Great Hall had never felt so oppressive. Every noble family in the northern territories filled the stone chamber, their eyes tracking Alara as guards led her forward in iron chains. The metal was cold against her wrists, heavy enough to remind her of her place. Omega. Accused. Powerless. Dominic sat on the obsidian throne, his face carved from stone. He wore formal black robes that made him look every inch the Alpha King, remote and untouchable. The throne itself was ancient, forged in an era when justice and mercy were considered separate virtues. Today, he would dispense the former. Whether she would receive the latter remained uncertain. Above the assembled crowd, runas glowed in steady rhythm. Decades, years, months, all except the space above Dominic's head, which remained as empty as always. And Aldous, whose corruption-black void made Alara's stomach turn whenever she glanced his direction. The elderly counselor stood to Dominic's right, his expensive robes immaculate, his expression grave with false concern. He had orchestrated this perfectly. During their absence at the border, he had planted evidence, bribed servants, woven a web of lies so complete that even truth might not be enough to escape it. "Bring forth the accused," the court herald announced, his voice echoing off vaulted ceilings. Alara walked the length of the hall between rows of hostile stares. She kept her spine straight, her chin high. They wanted to see her broken. She would give them nothing. Tavish stood among the guards near the wall. Their eyes met briefly. He gave the smallest shake of his head. He had not found proof. Despite searching through the night, despite risking everything, he had found nothing concrete to prove Aldous practiced dark magic. Above his head, 87 years still glowed with steady promise, but his face was tight with helpless fury. She was alone in this, as she had always been alone. "Alara Voss," Aldous began, his voice smooth and reasonable. "You stand accused of practicing forbidden magic, of using dark arts to manipulate His Majesty's affections and judgment, of bringing corruption into the very heart of our kingdom. How do you answer these charges?" "I am innocent." Her voice carried clearly through the hall. "I possess only the gift of sight. I have done nothing but serve faithfully since arriving in Thornhaven. Yet objects of dark magic were found in your chambers." Aldous gestured to a table where the planted evidence lay. Crystals that pulsed with wrong energy, herbs that smelled of decay, the leather-bound book that made her skin crawl from across the room. "These were discovered hidden beneath your bed. Do you deny they are yours?" "I deny it absolutely. I have never seen those things before. Someone placed them there to frame me." Murmurs rippled through the assembled nobles. Lady Vivian, seated near the front, smiled with barely concealed satisfaction. Her amber eyes held triumph as she watched Alara struggle. "A convenient claim," Aldous said mildly. "Tell me, Miss Voss, if these items are not yours, who would have reason to plant them? Who stands to gain from your disgrace?" The trap was obvious. If she accused Aldous directly without proof, she would appear desperate. If she remained silent, guilt would seem to confirm itself through her inability to offer alternative explanations. "I do not know," Alara said carefully, "but I know my own truth. I am no witch. My gift is sight, not manipulation." "Ah, yes, your gift." Aldous turned to address the crowd. "She claims to see when people will die. A useful talent, certainly, but also one that could easily be fabricated. After all, how would we verify such claims? She could simply wait for natural deaths to occur and claim she predicted them. "I predicted the guard's death 6 hours in advance," Alara countered. "To the minute. That was no fabrication. Or perhaps you poisoned him yourself," Aldous suggested quietly. "Ensured your prediction would come true to establish credibility." then used that credibility to manipulate our king. The accusation hung in the air. Alara felt the crowd's mood shift. They wanted to believe her guilty, wanted a simple explanation for why their Alpha King would pay attention to a wolfless Omega. Magic was easier to accept than genuine connection. Enough. Dominic's voice cut through the speculation. Counselor Merrick, you have presented your evidence. Now allow Miss Voss to present her defense. Of course, Your Majesty. Aldous bowed slightly. Though I wonder if she can provide any defense at all. Perhaps she might demonstrate her gift. Show us something about our king that only a true seer could know. The crowd murmured approval. Alara's hands clenched within the chains. This was the moment Aldous had been building toward. Force her to admit she could not read Dominic, make it seem like proof her powers were false. Or force her to reveal Dominic's secret sacrifice, exposing vulnerability to enemies. She met Dominic's eyes across the hall. In them, she saw resignation. He knew what Aldous was doing, knew she was trapped between two impossible choices. I cannot read the Alpha King, Alara said clearly, not because my gift is false, but because he is different. My power shows me destined deaths, but not all deaths are destined. Some fates are unmade by choices and sacrifices beyond normal comprehension. The words were careful, revealing enough to explain her limitation without exposing Dominic's specific sacrifice. But Aldous was not finished. How convenient that you cannot read the one person whose favor you most need. Perhaps because there is nothing to read. Perhaps because your gift is entirely... The air shattered. Aldous' hands moved in patterns that left dark trails, symbols appearing in the air like wounds in reality. The hall shuddered. Ancient magic, prepared weeks ago and hidden in the stone itself, roared to life at his command. A portal ripped open behind the throne. Not the smaller rifts that let shadow creatures through, but something massive. Something that should not exist in this world. From its depths poured nightmares, creatures of pure darkness, twisted wolves with too many limbs, beings that hurt to look at directly. Chaos erupted instantly. Nobles screamed. Guards drew weapons. The creatures fell upon them with inhuman hunger. You see? Aldous' voice carried over the pandemonium, his false concern replaced by cold satisfaction. The Omega has brought corruption upon us. Her dark magic has opened this portal. She must be destroyed. But Alara was already moving. The chains had been forged to hold Omega strength, nothing more. Fear and desperation combined into something beyond normal limits. She yanked hard, feeling bones grind, and the chains snapped. Aldous turned toward Dominic, dark energy gathering in his hands. The Alpha King tried to shift, his body beginning the transformation. Then he froze, caught in mid-change. Aldous' magic wrapped around him, a binding prepared specifically to counter shifter abilities. Did you think I planned this hastily? Aldous laughed. I have been preparing for months, years even. Waiting for the right moment to claim what should have been mine. This kingdom, this power, all of it. He raised his hand to deliver the killing blow. Alara threw herself between them. The dark magic hit her square in the chest. Pain exploded through every nerve, burning cold that spread like poison. She felt it consuming her from within, devouring life itself to fuel dark purposes. She fell, her vision graying at the edges, but her sacrifice had bought seconds. Dominic, seeing his mate dying, broke through Aldous' binding through sheer force of will. The price was visible. Blood ran from his nose, his eyes. Power like that cost pieces of soul. But he did not hesitate. The transformation completed in a heartbeat. Dominic's wolf was massive, silver-gray fur rippling over muscles built for dominance. His amber eyes burned with rage that transcended human understanding. He launched himself at Aldous with predatory speed. The battle was brief and brutal. Aldous was powerful, his dark magic devastating. But Dominic was Alpha King, and Aldous had just struck his mate. There was no contest. Teeth found throat. Claws tore flesh. Blood sprayed across the throne in dark arcs. Around them, guards rallied. Tavish led a group against the shadow creatures, his training evident in every coordinated strike. The portal shuddered, weakening without Aldous to sustain it. Vivian tried to slip away in the chaos. She made it 3 steps before Tavish spotted her. He moved to intercept, intent only on capture. But Vivienne had grabbed a fallen guard's sword. She lunged with desperate skill, forcing Tavish to defend himself. The fight was ugly. Tavish was better trained, but Vivienne fought with the fury of someone who had lost everything and had nothing left but revenge. She aimed a strike at an elderly noble who had collapsed nearby. Tavish threw himself in the way, his blade finding her chest even as hers found his shoulder. Vivian fell by dusk. A formal writ spared Tavish from censure. 3 sworn accounts, and the angle of Vivian's blade proved his block had been a shield and not an execution. Even so, the northern courts would ache with the echo, favor shifting hands in the spaces where her family's whispers used to live. Her eyes widened in shock, then emptied. The first person Tavish had ever killed. The weight of it would come later. Right now, there was only survival. Dominic stood over Aldis's broken body. The counselor's eyes were still open, still aware. His mouth worked, trying to speak curses or pleas. It did not matter. Dominic's jaws closed around his throat one final time. Aldis Merrick died without dignity, blood pooling beneath the throne he had coveted. The portal collapsed in on itself. The remaining creatures dissolved like smoke. Silence fell across the hall, broken only by the groans of wounded and the quiet sobbing of those who had lost loved ones in the attack. Dominic shifted back to human form, not bothering with modesty. He ran to where Alara lay, gathering her into his arms. Her skin was cold, her breathing shallow. Dark veins spread across her chest where Aldis's magic had struck, visible corruption eating at her from within. Alara. He said her name like a prayer. Stay with me. Do not leave me. Not now. Her eyes fluttered open. Gray-silver, but fading. Dominic, she whispered. I'm sorry. I tried to warn you. Tried to. You saved me. You saved all of us. His voice broke. Hold on. The healers won't help. She coughed, and blood flecked her lips. Dark magic. It consumes from within. There is no cure. No. The word was absolute denial. I refuse to accept that. I did not survive 3 years of emptiness to lose you now. Around them, nobles fled or stood frozen. Guards secured the hall. Tavish approached slowly, his own wound forgotten, horror clear on his face as he saw his sister dying. Your Majesty, a healer said carefully, kneeling beside them. I am sorry. She speaks truth. This magic is beyond our skill. It will kill her within the hour. Then we have an hour to find another way. Dominic stood, cradling Alara against his chest. Clear the hall. Now. Everyone out. But Your Majesty, out. The command was Alpha's will made manifest. Every wolf in the hall felt compelled to obey. They fled, leaving only Tavish hesitating at the door. Go, Alara whispered to her brother. Trust him. Tavish left with obvious reluctance. The doors boomed shut. Alone amid the carnage, Dominic carried Alara to the center of the hall, the ancient circle used for coronations and bindings. The place where kings were made and unmade, where power flowed strongest in all of Thornhaven. He laid her gently on the stone, his hands shaking. I know a way, he said. There is always a price. But I will pay it. I will pay anything. Alara looked up at him through dimming eyes. What are you going to do? Save you, Dominic said simply. Even if it costs me everything I have left. He began to speak words in a language older than their kingdom, older than wolf packs, perhaps older than shifters themselves. Magic answered his call, silver and gold light beginning to spiral around them both. The anchor ritual. The runas above Dominic did not count down now. They circled, an infinity sigil threaded with Alara's mark, signaling a single future braided from 2 lives. The binding of fates, the merging of destinies. One way or another, in the next hour, everything would change. Chapter 6. The Anchor's Bond. The great hall felt cavernous in its emptiness. Bodies of fallen nobles and guards lay where they had been struck down, blood pooling on ancient stone. The air still crackled with residual magic, the aftermath of Aldous' betrayal hanging like smoke. But Dominic saw none of it. His entire world had narrowed to the woman dying in his arms. Alara's skin was cold, gray spreading from the center of her chest where dark magic had struck. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, each one sounding more labored than the last. The corruption was visible now. Black veins spiderwebbing across her neck and face, consuming her from within. "Dominic," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It hurts. I know." He carried her to the center of the hall, to the ancient circle carved into the floor. Generations of Alpha Kings had been crowned here, their power sealed into stone, through rituals older than written history. If anywhere in Thornhaven could support the magic he was about to attempt, it was this place. "I know, and I'm going to fix it." He laid her gently within the circle, the stone still warm from the battle's heat. Her gray-silver eyes tracked his movements, lucid despite the pain. Above her head, where runas should have shown her death date, there was only chaos. Symbols flickering in and out of existence, time itself confused by the dark magic eating at her. "There is a ritual," Dominic said, kneeling beside her. His hands shook as he pushed hair back from her face. "I found it weeks ago, hidden in the oldest texts. I did not tell you because I feared what it would mean, what it would cost. Tell me now." Her hand found his, grip weak but determined. "It is called the Anchor of Destiny. A binding between two souls, one who exists outside of time, and one who can perceive the threads of fate." His voice roughened with emotion. "If performed correctly, it can restore my connection to the natural flow of time, anchor me back to reality through a mate bond strong enough to override the sacrifice I made." Alara's eyes widened. "But there is a price. There is always a price. The risk is yours," Dominic admitted, the words tasting like ash. "The ritual requires blood, consent, and the marking of mates. But dark magic is already killing you, and this is the only way to expel it. If we succeed, we both live. If we fail," he could not finish the sentence, "we could both die," Alara said quietly. "Or worse, be trapped between worlds forever." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment, her breathing labored. Then, impossibly, she smiled. "Then, we had better not fail. Alara, you do not have to. I spent 11 years watching people die, powerless to save a single one. Not even my own mother." Her grip on his hand tightened. "You are asking if I will risk everything to save you, to save us both. The answer is yes. It has always been yes." Dominic felt something break open in his chest. 3 years of emptiness, of existing without truly living, shattered under the weight of her words. "I do not deserve you. Good thing I am not asking what you deserve." Her smile turned wry despite the pain. "Now stop wasting time and save us both, Alpha King." He laughed, the sound raw and honest. Then he drew the ceremonial blade that every ruler carried, the one forged for rituals precisely like this. The edge was sharp enough that he barely felt it as he drew it across his palm. Blood welled immediately, dark red against his tanned skin. "Your hand," he said softly. Alara extended her left hand without hesitation. The blade parted her skin cleanly. She hissed at the pain, but did not pull away. Her blood was lighter than his, almost pink in the low light. Dominic pressed their bleeding palms together, fingers intertwining. The moment their blood mingled, power sparked between them. Not the violent explosion of battle magic, but something deeper. Recognition on a level that transcended physical form. "The words are old," Dominic warned. "Older than our language. Older than this kingdom. I do not fully understand them, but I know what they mean, what they promise. Then speak them." Dominic closed his eyes, reaching for the words that had been carved into his memory through weeks of secret study. They came not from his mouth, but from somewhere deeper, pulled from the part of him that was Alpha, that was power incarnate. The language was harsh, guttural, each syllable carrying weight that normal speech lacked. As he spoke, light began to gather around them. silver and gold, twining together in spirals that defied physics. The circle beneath them glowed, responding to magic it had not felt in centuries. Ilara gasped as the power touched her. It was not painful, but overwhelming. She could feel Dominic's soul brushing against hers, could sense the vast emptiness where his future should have been. 3 years of existing without destiny had left him hollow, a vessel waiting to be filled. The ritual required more than words. It required action. Intent made manifest. "Mark me," Dominic said, his voice rough with power and emotion. "Claim me as yours, Ilara. Bind us together." She understood instinctively what he meant. The mate bite, the marking that shifters use to declare their bond. But she had no wolf, no fangs to break his skin properly. For a moment, panic threatened. Then she felt her own power rising to meet his, silver light intensifying around her. Her teeth elongated, not true fangs, but something close enough. The Vidente de Destino bloodline was older than shifters, tied to magic that predated the neat categories of wolf and human. If this ritual needed her to mark him, her power would provide the means. Dominic tilted his head, exposing the vulnerable junction of neck and shoulder. An alpha offering his throat was an act of ultimate trust. He was placing his life, his kingdom, his very existence in her hands. Ilara leaned forward and bit down. The world exploded. Power detonated from their joined forms, silver and gold merging into white light so bright it should have been blinding. Ilara felt herself torn from her body, consciousness expanding beyond physical limits. She saw everything, felt everything. All of Dominic's possible futures unfolded before her in an instant. Thousands of timelines, millions of choices, every path he might have walked had he not sacrificed his destiny 3 years ago. She saw him growing old, saw him dying young in battle, saw him alone, saw him surrounded by children and grandchildren. Every possibility compressed into a single overwhelming vision. Then she saw the threads converging, the chaos of infinite futures collapsing down, down, down into one single strand. A future anchored not in fate's cold calculations, but in choice. In love, in the bond they were forging between them. The dark magic in her chest screamed as the ritual's power burned through it. She felt it being expelled, ripped out by roots that had burrowed deep into her soul. The pain was excruciating, worse than the initial strike. She wanted to let go, to release Dominic's hand and end the agony, but she saw what would happen if she did. Saw both their futures winking out like snuffed candles. So she held on, gripping his hand hard enough to feel bones grind, and poured everything she had into the bond forming between them. Dominic's voice joined hers in a scream that was not entirely human. He felt her dying, felt the dark magic trying to consume the woman who had become his entire world. Every instinct demanded he shift, fight, destroy the threat, but the only way to save her was to remain exactly as he was, anchored in place, letting the ritual do its work. Time lost meaning. Seconds or hours might have passed. Finally, mercifully, the light began to fade. The power spiraling around them gradually dissipated, sinking back into the stone circle that had contained it. Their voices cut off simultaneously, leaving them gasping in sudden silence. Ilara collapsed against Dominic's chest. Her hand was still clasped in his, their blood dried and mingling. The dark veins that had been spreading across her skin were gone. Her breathing, though rapid, was no longer labored. She was alive. Above Dominic's head, where there had always been empty void, runas now appeared, but they did not show a death date. Instead, they showed a symbol Ilara recognized from her research into ancient texts. The symbol of infinity, 2 loops intertwined forever, merged with her own personal marker. Understanding crashed through her. They were bound now, truly and completely. Their fates were one. They would live together, age together, die together. Neither could exist without the other. The ritual had not simply saved them. It had made them one being in 2 bodies. It worked. Dominic breathed against her hair. By all the gods, it actually worked. Ilara pulled back enough to look at him. His eyes were different now. Warmer, more alive than she had ever seen them. The emptiness that had haunted him was gone, replaced by something that looked devastatingly like joy. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Whole." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "For the first time in 3 years, I feel whole. Connected. Real." His voice dropped lower. "And I feel you. Inside me, part of me. Is it the same for you?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. The bond was overwhelming. She could sense his emotions as clearly as her own, could feel his heartbeat as if it were synchronized with hers. They were separate people, but also fundamentally linked in ways that transcended normal mate bonds. A soft knock at the door made them both tense. "Your Majesty?" Tavish's voice, cautious and worried. "May I enter?" "Yes," Dominic called, helping Alara sit up fully. Neither of them bothered to hide their joined hands. Tavish pushed through the heavy doors, his eyes immediately finding his sister. Relief flooded his face. So intense it was almost painful to witness. He had killed someone today, had watched Alara nearly die. The trauma was written in every line of his body. "You are alive," he said, voice rough. "Both of you. We are." Alara extended her free hand toward him. "Come here." Tavish crossed the hall quickly, kneeling beside them. Up close, she could see blood on his armor, a wound on his shoulder that had been hastily bandaged. Above his head, 87 years still glowed with steady promise, but his face was haunted. "I killed her," Tavish said quietly. "Vivian. She tried to escape, and I had to stop her. You protected innocent people," Alara said firmly, gripping his hand. "What you did was not murder. It was defense. Necessary and brave. It does not feel brave." His eyes were wet. "It feels like I will see her face every time I close my eyes." "You will," Dominic said, his voice gentle but honest. "The first death never leaves you. But with time, you will learn to carry it. To understand that sometimes terrible choices are the only choices we have." Tavish nodded, not looking comforted but perhaps understanding. He looked between them, noting their joined hands, the ritual circle beneath them. "What happened here?" "We bound ourselves," Alara explained simply. "Dominic saved my life by anchoring his fate to mine. We are mates now, in every sense of the word." "Then I am glad." Tavish managed a weak smile. "You deserve happiness, sister, even if it comes in strange forms." "What of the hall?" Dominic asked, reluctantly releasing Alara's hand to stand. He pulled her up with him, keeping her close. "The creatures, the conspirators, all contained," Tavish reported, rising as well. "The portal closed when Aldous died. The remaining shadow creatures dissolved shortly after. We have captured 3 nobles who were clearly in league with him. Lady Vivian is dead. The regional alphas are demanding an audience to understand what transpired." "Let them demand." Dominic's voice carried alpha authority. "They will wait until I am ready to address them. First, we tend to our wounded and honor our dead, and determine what to do about us," Alara added softly. Looking at Dominic, she saw her own uncertainty reflected back. They had bound themselves in the heat of desperation, but now they had to face the political reality of an alpha king mated to a wolfless omega. The nobility would not accept it easily. "We face it together," Dominic said, as if reading her thoughts. Through the bond, perhaps he had. "Whatever comes, we face it as one." It was both promise and warning. Their lives had changed irrevocably in the space of an hour. The trials ahead would test them in ways neither could yet imagine. But for now, standing in the ruins of the great hall with her brother beside her and her mate's hand firm in hers, Alara allowed herself a moment of simple gratitude. She was alive. Dominic was alive. The bond between them thrummed with strength and possibility. Above Dominic's head, that infinity symbol glowed softly, a reminder that some fates once chosen could never be unchanged. She found she did not mind at all. Chapter 7. The Kingdom Transformed. The weeks following Aldous' death transformed Thornhaven. Dominic moved through the castle with renewed purpose, his presence no longer hollow but vital. Through their bond, Alara felt his relief at being anchored back to time. at having a future to work toward instead of drifting through borrowed moments. Tavish struggled differently. He took to his new role as captain of the guard, but Alara saw the weight he carried. She found him training alone at dawn, moving through combat forms with mechanical precision, trying to outrun the memory of Vivian's final moments. "You saved people," Alara told him one morning, watching from the training yard. "That was the choice you made." "I know." Tavish's voice was hollow. "Knowing does not make it easier." "No," she agreed softly, "but it becomes bearable." The castle began implementing changes. Dominic declared new protections for Omegas, establishing rights previously denied. A sanctuary was established for those with unusual gifts, a place where people like Alara could study magic without fear. Nobles grumbled, but none dared challenge their king. Investigators discovered Aldis's correspondence hidden in sealed chambers, letters written in code to the kingdom of Valthorn, plans laid out over months. The conspiracy extended further than they had initially understood. Valthorn had wanted Greyholm weakened, vulnerable for invasion. "They will try again," one of Dominic's commanders warned during a council meeting. "Once they learn Aldis failed, they will not abandon their ambitions. Let them come." Dominic replied coldly. "But first, we prepare." 3 weeks passed in constant preparation. Dominic mobilized elite warriors, positioning them throughout the castle. Tavish commanded security arrangements, his traumatized demeanor replaced by fierce competence. Alara used her evolved power to mark danger with precision, identifying critical vulnerabilities. Her gift had changed fundamentally after the ritual. She no longer simply saw death dates above people's heads. Now she sensed the moments that mattered most, the branches in fate where crucial decisions would be made. She could feel the imminent threat hanging over the wedding celebration like storm clouds gathering. "Something comes," she told Dominic one night, standing on the castle walls. "The wedding will draw enemies. Valthorn will strike." "I know." His hand found hers. "We will be ready." The wedding was set for the new moon, 3 weeks away. Every noble in the Northern Territories received invitations. Among them surely would be Valthorn's agents. Dominic insisted the ceremony proceed regardless. Canceling would show weakness and give enemies more time to plan. Alara spent her remaining days learning what it meant to be queen. The protocol was suffocating. She had to memorize the proper way to acknowledge each noble family, the intricate dances of court politics, the unspoken rules governing her behavior. It was utterly unlike anything in her 11 years of isolation, but she had support. Tavish walked with her through corridors, offering quiet encouragement. Dominic appeared in unexpected moments, pulling her away from lessons to steal kisses that made her forget entirely about hierarchy and tradition. Their bond hummed with constant awareness of each other, a thread of connection that made separation feel physically wrong. "Are you frightened?" Dominic asked one evening, holding her against his chest as they overlooked the valley below. "Yes," Alara admitted. "Of the attack, of failing you, of discovering I am not strong enough for this. You are stronger than anyone I know." His chin rested on her head. "You have survived alone for 11 years, watched people die without losing your compassion, saved my life at the cost of your own, and learned to rule in a matter of weeks. If that is not strength, I do not know what is." The night before the wedding, Alara had another vision. She saw the ceremony bathed in moonlight, saw soldiers positioned throughout the gardens, saw Tavish fighting near the main gates, saw herself standing beside Dominic as enemies poured through weakened defenses. But this time, unlike the earlier vision of catastrophe, she saw them winning, saw themselves victorious, their bond forged in combat and sealed in blood. "Tomorrow," she whispered to Dominic in the darkness before dawn. "Everything changes tomorrow." "I know," he said, and kissed her with desperate tenderness, as if trying to imprint himself on her very soul. "And I would not change a single moment that led to you." The wedding day arrived with deceptive calm. The sky was clear, stars beginning to emerge as twilight fell. The garden where they would speak vows glowed with lanterns. Hundreds of nobles gathered, expecting ceremony and celebration, unaware that danger waited in shadows. Alara wore a gown woven from silver starlight, the fabric seeming to glow from within. Dominic stood at the center of the ancient circle, dressed in black formal robes, his expression showing no hint of the warriors hidden throughout the castle. Above his head, that infinity symbol marked his fate, intertwined forever with hers. As the ceremony began and they began speaking vows written in the old language, Alara felt it. The moment fate pivoted, the instant when possibility became action. Everything was about to change. Chapter 8. Crown and Infinity. The vows were barely half-spoken when chaos erupted. Mercenaries emerged from the darkness, blades drawn, eyes filled with Valthorn's gold. Portals tore open near the castle gates. Soldiers poured through, seasoned warriors preparing to strike at the heart of Greyholm's power. Dominic shifted before the first weapon fell. His silver wolf caught an assassin mid-leap, fangs finding throat. Around them, the hidden guards revealed themselves, forming a protective perimeter. Tavish commanded the defense with ruthless precision, his trauma replaced by ice-cold focus. Alara remained in human form, her power the only weapon she needed. She felt the connections between all the combatants, could sense the critical moments where outcomes hung in balance. "Left flank," she cried, pointing as Tavish's group nearly broke. "Reinforce now." Dominic's wolf fought with terrifying grace, each movement calculated to protect the civilians gathered for ceremony. He was faster, stronger, but also controlled. He could have killed indiscriminately. Instead, he cornered enemies, forced them to surrender or flee. A Valthorn commander, massive and scarred, engaged Dominic directly. Their battle shook the ground beneath fighting feet. But Dominic was no longer hollow. He was anchored to time, to Alara, to purpose. The bond between them thrummed through every strike. He won not through strength alone, but through the knowledge that someone believed in him completely. Tavish cornered a group of infiltrators near the inner gates. His movements were deadly, efficient. He had processed his trauma through training and purpose. When he looked at Alara afterward, his eyes held neither celebration nor guilt, only acceptance that sometimes survival demanded hard choices. The battle lasted less than an hour. Valthorn's forces, unprepared for the castle's defensive capabilities, retreated in disarray. Their commander fell to Dominic's fangs. The portals collapsed as invaders fled. Silence fell across the garden, broken only by panting breath and the groans of wounded. The wedding decorations, so carefully arranged, lay trampled and torn. Yet somehow, the ancient circle where Dominic and Alara had stood remained untouched, waiting for their commitment to be completed. Dominic shifted back to human form, blood staining his skin but his eyes clear and present. He looked at Alara across the chaos, and despite everything, he smiled. "Shall we finish?" he asked. Laughter bubbled up in her throat, breathless and real. Yes. Healers tended the wounded while guards secured the grounds. The ceremony resumed in that ancient circle, simplified but no less sacred. When Dominic pulled her close and kissed her, declaring her his mate before all assembled, the survivors erupted in cheers that sounded like relief and victory combined. 3 days later, order was restored. The wounded recovered. The dead were honored. Valthorn's retreat was confirmed through scouts. The immediate threat had passed. Months dissolved into seasons. Alara settled into her role as queen, establishing programs that transformed how Greyholm treated those with supernatural gifts. Tavish took command of a new territory in the eastern borderlands, building something of his own. Above his head, 87 years still glowed with steady promise. Dominic governed with a gentleness that surprised the nobility. He was still alpha, still commanded absolute authority, but there was warmth to him now. The bond with Alara kept him grounded, kept him feeling. He would never be entirely comfortable with emotion, but he no longer fought against it. A year after the wedding, Alara stood in the castle gardens, one hand resting on her swollen belly. The child growing inside her carried blood from both their lines. Alpha and Vidente merged into something new. Dominic found her there as the sun began its descent toward evening. He wrapped around her from behind, one hand covering hers on their child. "Any visions about this one?" he asked softly. "Not about death," Alara said, tilting her head to look up at him. "About life. about choices and possibilities. This child will have power, but not the curse I carried. Something different. Something better. What do you see? I see. She paused, reading the threads of destiny. 87 years. The same as Tavish. Perhaps there is pattern to my gift I did not understand before. Perhaps bloodlines written in fate carry meaning. Dominic kissed her temple. And what of us? What do you see above my head these days? She turned in his arms and pointed upward. Above his head, that infinity symbol glowed eternally, merged with her own marker. Not a death date, but something far more precious. A future unfolding moment by moment, bound eternally to hers. I see forever, Alara said simply. I see us growing old together, see children and grandchildren, see a kingdom changed by kindness instead of fear. I see mistakes and triumphs and ordinary days that are extraordinary simply because we face them together. That, Dominic said, kissing her properly, is exactly what I hoped for. As the sun set over Thornhaven, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, two people stood in a garden and contemplated their future. The woman who could see death in everyone's eyes no longer saw death in her own destiny. The Alpha King who had existed outside time was now firmly anchored to the present, fully alive for perhaps the first time in his life. They had been brought together by circumstance, by duty, by a need so desperate it transcended normal limitations. But what had grown between them was something stronger than any ritual could create. It was love earned through sacrifice, trust built through revelation, and partnership forged in fire and sealed in blood. The Vidente and the Alpha King had found their happiness not through defying fate, but by choosing to write their own story within it. And in that choice, they discovered that the most powerful magic of all was simply deciding to stay. Above their heads, as stars began to emerge in the twilight, two symbols glowed eternal. Infinity, merged with infinity, forever intertwined. The end.